Okay, so,
Alright,
welcome.
welcome to Building Themes for Vaadin with Sass. Live from Turku.
Yeah, that started
Alright.
nicely. So,
Yeah. So let's introduce ourselves. I'm Marlon Richert. I'm a Vaadin designer, and you are?
hi, my name's Jouni, and I'm not going to try and even pronounce my last name, but anyway, for you, just to keep it simple. And I'm also a Vaadin designer here, and we're about to talk how to use SAS to build Vaadin themes and how to leverage all the goodness that it has.
Yes, so let's do that. Let's jump right in.
Yeah.
So what we did is, as you can,
Yeah, let's just go first through what we're going to actually talk about today.
Yes.
So first, we're going to present you a pre-built CSS theme and go through a couple of issues that regular CSS has. So problems with redundancy and stuff like that. And then after that, we'll jump to the SAS conversion of that, how we use SAS to actually fix some of the problems in regular CSS. And
yeah, and then we're going to continue after that with to show you how you can't just extend an existing Vaadin theme, but you can just take any kind of CSS from whatever kind of a non-Vaadin theme that you like and extend that, and we'll show you a brief example of how to do that.
yeah,
And then finally, we're going to talk about the future, where is the SAS compiler heading, and then there will be some time for questions, and we'll give answers to them hopefully.
sure. Okay. So let's jump to the example app that we have prepared.
Yeah, so this is based on To Do MVC, which is basically a baseline app that helps. So it's that helps you compare web frameworks. So they are supposed to all look the same. So if we, for example, we go to the GWT version,
Yeah.
you can briefly look at that. And you see it's like we already used it, so it still has some state there. This is a little to-do list. You can add items there, and you can mark them as complete, and then you can filter them. Look only at the ones that are complete, or etc.
Edit these here.
Yeah. So what we did is, over the past day and a half, we built our own version of this because there was no Vaadin version available yet, and we themed it to look exactly like this. So let's have a look at the code there.
Yeah, just quickly check that Eclipse is running. Yeah, sure, we have the app running, and here it is. So as you can see, looks the same and works the same. You can still mark stuff done, edited caption, and yeah, this is just a Vaadin app, and I'll quickly show you the actual UI here. So it's a simple class that contains all the logic and all the components. So this is not the interesting part in this webinar. You're pretty much familiar how to build Vaadin UIs. The theming part. So we have two pre-built themes here. So let's look at the CSS version first. So I built this by copy and pasting the stuff from the original To Do MVC app, and
yeah, so this is just plain CSS, and this was just made for a normal web app, so not even for a Vaadin app. But of course, we had to make some slight tweaks there to make it work.
Some slight tweaks, but I'd say about maybe 70%, 80% was just pure copy paste, all the properties, but mostly just selectors are the issue that you need to sometimes work with. Like some components have different selectors or different DOM structures than the original. Anyway, so the problems with the regular CSS.
Well, that's basically that you have a lot of redundancy. So if you can look, for example, here, if you look at the appearance property there, so you have several vendor prefixed versions because you want to make this compatible with several browsers. That's a lot of repetition basically there.
Yeah. which is unfortunately unavoidable currently with plain CSS, because vendors still have those prefixes, and if you need to support the older ones, then
All the
kind of need to,
browsers, yeah.
then you need those.
So let's continue and have a look. What else is there?
So again, similar case,
Yeah.
vendor prefixes.
Oh, but here we have a different one. So here we see the native button. Now, if we scroll back up a little bit, then you see that we already countered that one there. So again, we have redundancy here. We have the native button more than once, and we're going to show you like how to when using SAS that you can easily avoid that kind of repetitions there.
And another repetition that you can spot here is the font size, for instance.
Oh yeah,
and the line height.
Yeah,
which is defined 2 times here.
Yeah. So basically, I think we can, sort of, in general, say that the problem with CSS is that you get like a lot of redundancy, and that's redundancy that you basically have to maintain. If you change it in one place, you'll have to change it in many, many places.
Yeah. So search and replace has been your pretty much your only tool in refactoring CSS.
Yeah.
Just moving on, you can see a lot of these vendor prefixes being the main culprits of repetition, but also this selector repetition is another issue. And well, just skipping a bit, we can see here toggle all, for instance, is repeating already like 4 times. But then we get to the to-do row, which is like they just keep coming and coming and coming.
Yeah.
So that has a little bit of code smell there.
Yep.
And
another thing you have with CSS, that while CSS is very dependent on the DOM structure, you don't actually find that much about that structure back in your CSS, and we're going to show how that's a little bit better with SAS at the moment.
Yeah. So everything's kind of flattened here. You can't see the structure too much. And what's making it worse is that all the selectors here are in one file, which is kind of a typical way of developing CSS when you do it like probably wrong. In a simple case, it's fine to have all your styles in one file, but usually you want to separate those into logical pieces, different files.
Yeah,
it's more maintainable.
You want to keep stuff that belongs together. You want to keep that together in one place. And as you, for example, saw in the beginning with that V native button, CSS doesn't exactly encourage that. It can be all over the place.
Yeah, you can just works fine if it's here or if it's here. So there's no coupling between these now.
No, when there should be.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So now that we've identified the issues, then we can happily say that these are all issues that we can actually address with SAS. So let's have a look at what our SAS conversion looks like.
Okay, so I'll just open these up side by side here. At least I try. Here we go. So our entry point looks somewhat different than the original. So let's first go top down and then start looking at the individual points here. How do we fix these? Just so people get on board how this works. So we have the to-do MVC main mixin that we're using, which is defined in this to-do MVC file. So let's jump there. And we can see there are multiple imports now that we've logically separated into pieces. But if we want to find now actually where we fix this redundancy in the vendor prefixes, then that's going to be in the reset. So I'll open that file. There. So we've defined a mixin for these styles, just to keep them logically separated from the rest. And here's the fixed version.
Yeah, so as you can see that we only have one line to cover all 4 of those vendor prefixed appearance properties. So let's have a look at how that's implemented.
Yeah, so we have a different file then that we're importing called Mixins in our case, which contains the actual definition of the appearance mixin. And now we only have one place where we define all the vendor prefixes that we need. And when this becomes actually really useful is when you need to repeat these appearances for other than just the button selector. So we actually have this, if I search for appearance in this file, we have them in many places, not just the button selector. We have them in more than one place. So we benefit from the mixin in that way. So we only have to define those vendor prefixes in one place in the mixin definition, and those get automatically included in the places where the mixin is called. And once the browsers that we want to support actually support the standard unprefixed version of the property, we can start dropping out these prefix versions and start slimming down our actual CSS output.
Yeah, and then we can do that by just modifying the code in one place. Or for example, should we have a necessity to add another vendor prefix that isn't there yet, we can do it here.
Yeah.
And it's just in one place and we fix it everywhere, then we use it then, which is much more maintainable than doing that in CSS.
Yeah. So, so that's kind of what this Mixins file does here. So it's only defining these vendor prefixes and covering that issue for us. So as you can see, we've extracted like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 different mixins from the original CSS. So the output should be exactly the same, but we've just managed to make it more maintainable. Okay, so another issue that we encountered with the original CSS was, well, the first instance was the native button. So we have this duplicate selector here. So how do we fix that?
Yeah, well, and there's a very elegant solution for that in SAS, and that's nesting. So let's have a look at what that means.
Yeah, it's also in the same resets file, because as I said, we had to make some little tweaks to the original styles, because Vaadin the base theme has some default styles, and some of those are fighting with or are causing a bit of trouble with the app, so we need to override those.
Yeah, so with the CSS that we imported from the other implementation of the to-do MVC.
Yeah, so we need to fix a couple of issues, so that's why I added them here in the reset, so it's kind of resetting the base styles from Vaadin. But here we get to the nesting part. So
yeah, so we had two styles. We had the, if you can see on the, they're at the top, at the,
I just
the left.
Went past them
Yeah,
already.
so there's the native button, so that you can see that there on the right on line 32, 33. And then if you on the left scroll more up,
yeah, it was already there.
There
yes.
you can have the other native button part. And now you can see these are nested inside each other. And this is a nice visual part of SAS, because this shows clearly visually also that the caption is inside the button. And that's really, of course, what that space in the CSS on the left means, is that the native button caption is a descendant of the native button. And then SAS has this nicely visual way of indicating that.
Yeah.
And this block of code here will generate those two blocks of code that you saw on the left there.
Yeah, I might just copy that over so we can see.
Yeah,
More easily compare how those look.
exactly.
So the output of this is exactly the same as on the left side. So that covers the repetition of the selectors. So we can only type that once, and if we ever would need to change that, we would only need to change it in one place. And well, we can look at. Well, let's move on and just see some more advanced uses of the nesting. So I'll jump to the to-do row section here, which starts from here. So we can look at these, and I'll open the to-do row definition. So,
Yeah, well, first of all, if you look at the top there, we have another interesting new feature that we haven't discussed yet. So there's variables. So what happens in this file is that, you know, those values of 43 pixels and 1 pixels, they are repeating in a bunch of places with the same meaning. And then we can extract those to variables. And then again, we have one place where we can change all the usage of it.
yeah. But we can talk about variables a bit more slightly later, but now just sticking to nesting, you can see the parent reference here in use. Because normally if you just nest things, they end up as descendant selectors with the space. But using the parent ampersand selector, you can actually combine the parent selector with anything that comes after the parent selector. Or you could even add this after the selector, but
well, then you have to keep in mind that the ampersand is the parent selector completely resolved, and that means that, so if this mixin to do row is included in some other place, and that has a descendant selector around it, so for this to do row over there, that is first processed and to, you know, compiled to a whole selector, and that whole thing is then put here to replace the ampersand. So if your ampersand is over here, so everything, like, so
yeah,
from the topmost level gets over there. So that you have to something to keep in mind. You cannot, if you have that ampersand over here, you don't just get dot to do row. You get everything that is going to be prefixed in front of to do row. You also get that over here.
Yeah, and you know, in our case, it's going to be actually. Let's just see the style. So it's going to include also this to do MVC theme parent name or parent style class.
Yeah.
So we'll just, as you can see, we've also now calling mixins inside mixins. So we're inside the to-do row mixin and calling the appearance mixin inside from there. And well, here's one little tidbit of cumbersome information, I guess. Some ASCII characters don't end up in the compiled CSS as intended with the current version of the Vaadin SAS compiler, so we needed to use the Unicode, actual Unicode escaped character value here instead of the actual character.
Yeah. That's a bug, and that should be fixed in the future.
Yeah, that's definitely a bug. And also, what I ended up doing is converting comments, so regular CSS comments, into SAS comments, which has a nice benefit of actually omitting these comments from the actual CSS output, so you send less stuff over the wire to the client. Because with regular CSS comments, those will end up to the output, even when compiled with the SAS compiler. So there's two kinds of comments in SAS. So you have I would say, I guess those are called C-style comments, C language. But it also supports the regular SAS style comments, but those, I mean CSS style comments, and those end up in the actual output.
Yeah, so in CSS you have these block comments, and those are still there,
yeah,
just because they're just plain CSS, but if you make a line comment like this,
yes,
then it won't end up in your output.
Yeah. So you can keep your developer comments in your source files, and those don't end up in the actual output. You can just keep some header information, perhaps some copyright notices or something else with block comments. There's not much else to nesting. It's just a neat way of keeping things organized. And as you can see, we're doing another level of nesting here with the input, the checkbox input, which has a nested after selector inside it. So if we scroll down here, I guess I scrolled past it already.
Well, you were there.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah, right. So it's generating this selector now.
Yeah. And so you can see that the ampersand will be replaced not just with this but the SAS compiler will first resolve this, so that will add the to-do row, and then it finds the ampersand and it adds all the things that were there.
Yeah. So that's pretty much nesting and how you can leverage that. And now we only should have at most one place where we define certain selectors. There are some things that keep repeating, like there was this, you can't avoid stuff like this, like the after here. That's pretty much unavoidable duplication. But since that's just regular CSS, it's not going to change. It's in the spec. It's not something you defined yourself.
Yes, whereas, for example,
for the to-do row in our case,
exactly.
that's something that we've defined in our Java code as well, that we're using the style name for the component.
Yeah, and so now if in the future you want to change your style name there, then hopefully in your Java code you're using constants, so you can also change it in one place.
Yeah.
And then here in SAS you also have one place where you need to change it.
Yes.
Right, so then we talked about nesting, we talked about mixins, how to include them. I briefly mentioned variables. Do you want to add something about that?
Sure. We have actually a file called variables here with a few examples. Just some that I picked up from the original CSS. So as we saw initially, there's the font size, for instance, and line height. Those are natural things to move into variables. So we have actually a couple of places where we needed to use this. So there's the widget class name, just to override the Vaadin default values. We needed to use them there, and then the original CSS had those defined for the body element, and those are then defined here. So for the Vaadin generated body element, we're using the font size here and line height as well, and the color as well. So the syntax pretty straightforward, just a $, and for setting the values you use the colon.
Yeah, and notice now that so in Mixins you can have both parameters and you can use global variables there. So those are all accessible.
Yeah. So these would be global variables since they are not defined inside any selector or mixin. And they are included in our main style sheet, the to-do MVC file here.
Yeah, so there they're imported, and then note that, so you have to import the SAS files. You don't actually have to say .sas, or you don't even have to put the underscore that is actually in front of the files.
Yeah, that's just a SAS
shorthand, basically. Yeah,
and the underscore is a convention of marking partial files that don't actually by themselves generate output. They just contain mixins or functions.
Right, and then you still have to include the mixins, but in the order in which you want their output to be generated.
Yeah, so mixins allow that kind of a more flexibility in that sense. So the output doesn't end up in the place where you actually import the file. You can still decide in which context you want to import that or include it.
Yeah, and also in the case of in the case of SAS, if we're importing just SAS files, this will all be compiled into one big CSS file.
Yeah, so you're not actually calling these over HTTP. So if we would have a more elaborate CSS theme, we would end up splitting it into multiple CSS files in a usual case, and you'd end up then importing those in the styles.css file. And these regular CSS imports end up as HTTP requests in the browser, which will, of course, slow down the startup of your app.
Yeah, but so for example, say that if we weren't extending the base legacy styles, say we were extending reindeer legacy styles, so then our theme will cause the browser to do a HTTP request to import first the reindeer legacy styles, and then it will again import the base legacy styles. Whereas in this case, if we're using SAS, all of it gets compiled into one CSS file.
Yeah, even if we were use reindeer.
Yeah.
But in our case, we just wanted to use base because that's an easier starting point since we don't actually need that much styling in the app.
Yeah, because if we look again at the app, this doesn't really look like any of the Vaadin themes that we have.
No.
So this is completely custom, and in that kind of cases, it just makes a lot of sense to start with the base theme. But you know, if you want something that looks mostly like reindeer, then you should of course use reindeer, or if it, you know, chameleon theme, or Bruno. But for things that are just really, really different, it doesn't make much sense to start with any of the, you know, sort of more finished pre-made Vaadin themes. You should start with the base theme.
Yeah, you just end up with unnecessary CSS that you're never going to use.
Yeah, and it might also actually be really hard to override some of the CSS selectors there.
That's like the problem part for the developer, and the other part is for the end user, that they end up downloading massive amounts of unnecessary CSS.
Yeah, and if you look at the app again, we could just quickly show that. So I'm just going to add some items there and talk about some things. And if we inspect that with the browser's web inspector, so for example, we have here where there's some style being applied, and then you can look where does the style come from, and this is all one styles.css. So you don't, on the client side, you don't see any Sass. It's just CSS, and I'm going to grab that. I can't. So you see this stuff at the top here?
Yep.
That comes from the base theme. So that's just stuff that's from the base theme, and only at the bottom there do you get to see the things that are from our own special theme that we've implemented there. So you get that all in one file, and it's all CSS. So just compile. It's just a kind of like you know, GWT in that respect. You just compile it once, and then it's just ready to serve.
Yeah.
All right. So this is an example of how you can convert your own CSS theme, so your custom theme, to use Sass to remove all that redundancy and to make a more maintainable, readable code. But why don't we have a little look at, say, that you have a basis of CSS that wasn't made specifically for Vaadin, and you want to now, you think that looks nice, so like something like, say, Twitter Bootstrap.
Yeah,
and
we've had many questions on the forums, like over the years, that people ask, how do I use Bootstrap in a Vaadin app, and is it possible at all? And like previously, before CS preprocessors like Sass and Less and the others, it wasn't really an option, because the DOM structures of a Vaadin app and the expected DOM structure of Bootstrap they're just totally different. So it's really hard to try and make those work together. But with Sass, it's actually not that difficult nowadays anymore. So I've actually tried prototyping this, and I have that in my GitHub account. So there's this project called Bootstrap Vaadin, and I'll make it a bit bigger. And let's dive into the themes folder here. What I've done here is I've taken the Sass version of Bootstrap, the compiled CSS. And when I actually started this, there wasn't a Sass version of Bootstrap, but nowadays there's actually a SAS Conversion of Bootstrap.
Yeah, but so this actually uses the CSS version of Bootstrap, basically.
Yes, and well, Bootstrap was initially built with Less, so I couldn't use that, so I kind of had to use the generated CSS. So these are the actual CSS files that I've downloaded from the Bootstrap website, and it used to be called bootstrap.css, of course, but I'll just quickly show that it's actually the Bootstrap version 3.
And Jouni just renamed it.
Yeah, and there's a reason for that, because the way Sass works is, I'll show the SCSS version then. So when I import that, if it would be a regular CSS file, that wouldn't be that wouldn't be possible to use in the SAS compiler. So you wouldn't be able to kind of leverage those selectors that the Bootstrap has. So it would end up as an HTTP request in the browser. So the SAS compiler, if I had that as a CS file, it would just keep it as an import statement. So it wouldn't combine those selectors into this file. So in one file, I needed to convert that to SCSS, the file extension. And what that allows me to do then is that I can use the extend functionality of SAS. So
so the extend keyword is like your friend when trying to extend a CSS theme, so something that doesn't have mixes. Because I do want to say that mixins are generally the better solution. You make reusable, there's little functions basically, and that insert SAS or CSS into a certain part of your style sheet. But given that this CSS that we're extending, it doesn't have that, it's really nice that SAS has an alternative solution here, and that's the extend keyword there.
Yeah, so we can start mixing selectors together. Basically what this does is that it's going to include these selectors. So in our case, the parent selector, whatever that is in our case, and also the V widget style name, it's going to add to the body selector of the Bootstrap styles. So we inherit, for instance, all the text styles from the body class. If we look at the not that one, look at this one. So there's body and margin 0. There should be the font sizes somewhere. There we go. So we end up extending or kind of inheriting these properties to our V widget class name. So even though those selectors are totally different, we can still use those properties in the Bootstrap CSS.
Yeah, and a useful analogy that Jouni already hinted at this for you Java guys is that extend is basically like extends in Java, it's inheritance, whereas mixins are more like composition. And just like in Java with object-oriented programming, usually you should prefer composition over inheritance, and that's true here as well. So that's why I said that generally, I don't think extend is really most of the time necessary for your own themes, or even when, well, maybe a little bit more necessary when extending some of the pre-made Vaadin themes. But most of the time you want to do just mixins instead. But especially when you're extending a CSS only theme, then it really comes in handy.
Yeah. So if you're in full control of your CSS and all the styles that you write, you should prefer mixins over extending, because if you don't know exactly what you're doing, you might end up with extend like overly complex selectors and a bunch of unnecessary selectors because of the way it works. So
yeah, because what it does, and maybe this is slightly counterintuitive, but so it's good to point out that it will find all instances of this selector that you're extending. And it has to be a simple selector, and where those are found, it will duplicate each selector that contains this, but replacing this word with that one.
Yes.
Or that one, which means that one.
Actually, not. Or, that's the mixin.
Okay, that's the mix. Sorry, my bad. Wherever the mixin is. See, because again, so you can use this also right in the root of the mixin. So you can't see the mixin here. What is the parent? But this is the parent, whatever the parent is. So any instance of body, those rules are duplicated, and then the body is replaced with V widget and whatever the parent is of this mixin where you actually use it.
Yeah. So that includes all like cases where this body might be appended with like focus or active or any pseudo classes or any child selectors. So those would be replaced. So let's look at for instance buttons. However, why do I have two buttons? That must be a mistake. Okay, so how do I use the Bootstrap button styles to style Vaadin buttons? So as you can see, I'm only using the Extend. I have no additional CSS properties here. So the default button is just extending the button btn class of Bootstrap, and that's it. And all the different styles then, all the primary, success, info, I'm just extending a class from Bootstrap.
Yeah. So this is basically, so what you're trying to express here is that I want all my V button divs to look exactly like the .btn divs. Yeah. So we're, or in other words, we're in object-oriented thinking, we're saying V button is a BTN. So, a Vaadin button is a Bootstrap button, and then it will, like I said, it will duplicate all those rules, and it will replace the in the duplicates, it will replace the BTN V button. But that's, so also remark then, so that we still have all those .btn rules. So
yes.
Even if we're not actually don't have any divs that have the BTN class names, we will still have all of those.
Yeah, all the original selectors from Bootstrap are still going to be in the output. So this approach will give you like unnecessary CSS, but it's kind of unavoidable in this case. Or unless you add some build step afterwards and try to get rid of those, but I don't see the point in that, really.
But basically, if, so let's say you wanted to do this without SAS, you would basically just have to go through the original CSS file and do the find and replace thing, where you just yourself replace all the instances of .btn with .v button. And this is a much cleaner way of doing it.
And you benefit that you can actually update your Bootstrap version easy.
Yeah, without having to touch it. I mean, because you don't have to change it actually.
Yes. And well, a more complex example, perhaps a table. So there I have to do some additional things because there's not a suitable style class to extend in Bootstrap, like I've commented here. But most stuff you can just get away by using the Extend. And I do have a actual example of this running here, so we can see it in action. So this is a Vaadin app mimicking Bootstrap. So here we have the buttons and the tables. If you look underneath here, let's inspect the button, for instance. So it's a regular V button element, and well, now you can see the actual styles that get generated. So if we jump into the CSS, so it doesn't produce like maybe so pretty output, but it's a workaround in a sense, but a nice workaround that you're actually able to pull this off, so you can actually use some CSS from some other project without actually modifying all the selectors.
Yeah, which makes this infinitely more maintainable than do it the old school way of actually find and replace and modifying the original files. Yeah, again, you just have one place where you're doing this, and then you can change that later if you want to update the file that you're depending on without having to break anything.
Yes. So yeah, that's Extend is kind of the tool that you use to use non-Vaadin CSS in your Vaadin apps. Yeah. So, but anyway, if someone wants to join in and make this like a full Bootstrap theme for Vaadin, I'm eagerly waiting for committers. But maybe we should talk a bit about the future.
Yeah. So do you want to show the Valo theme, the demo you have, or?
I don't know. Maybe. Yeah. So there's for those of you who don't know, there's a new theme called Valo coming in Vaadin 7.3, which is fully based on SAS. So it's heavily using Mixins and functions and variables to make it very customizable for your needs.
Yeah, and also for upcoming version of Vaadin, we're trying to get feature compatibility with SAS 3.2. So Valo and SAS 3.2 compatibility. That's something to look out for in the future.
Yes, yeah.
All right.
So,
And then I think we can do some questions and answers that we've gotten from our viewers. Let's see.
Should I quickly show Valo? I don't know. I'll just... Oh, maybe I should just run that here.
Seem to have lost the questions again. So
Technical
technical problems with that.
Yeah, so let's take the demo styles here. And
all right.
so here's a Valo demo in action, or Valo theme in action. So, well, I'm not gonna like go through much of it, just showing quickly that you can, for instance, change the background color of the app just by using a variable and then reloading the app, and then we have different styles for the app. But yeah, apparently I've done some customizations here that don't work well with that color. So like we have this background color here, just get rid of that.
Yeah. So the idea with the Valo theme is because you guys are probably familiar with the Chameleon theme, where it was built with the idea of that you were able to easily customize it, but you still needed quite a lot of CSS to customize that, even though it was more customizable than say Reindeer or Runo, especially when it comes to the color scheme. But now with the Valo theme, we are building it in such a way that it's really parameterized, so you can use SAS variables to easily change little bits and pieces that you want to tweak. So you don't actually have to, when extending this, you won't actually have to write that much SAS or CSS at all to make it look the way you want.
We have stuff like border radius, which is pretty self-explanatory what that does. So it makes stuff more round, affects like this top level variable affects all the components, and then there's more specialized variables for buttons and all the other components. And also this is just scratching the surface of Valo. There's a lot of stuff that you can actually change here. So there's the gradients, there's the bevel styles, how kind of 3D, how should I put it, it looks. So you can do a full flat theme, which is the current kind of trend or the direction that themes are going in. So those are possible with Valo. And I encourage you to read the blog post that Jonas wrote a while ago about the Vaadin 7.x series. So he described Valo there also.
Yeah, available on the Vaadin.com blog.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So anyway, I got the questions online. So shall we go to those? All right. So Vijayakant from India asks us if we can explain how to efficiently use SAS in responsive web design. So do you want to take that one, Jouni?
Yeah, so how I see it, that is that SAS doesn't have that much effect on responsive web design, because you just use the same techniques as you do in CSS for responsive web design. So media queries, that's your tool for responsive web design, and how there's some stuff in SAS that makes it a bit more, I'd say, easier to maintain your media queries in SAS than in plain CSS. But other than that, there's not much to it. SAS doesn't have that much to help you with responsive web design.
Okay. All right, then Matthew from the US asks us, do you have advice on keeping the SAS as light as possible so rendering is as fast as possible? Well, the thing is that using SAS doesn't really impact your rendering performance that much, because it's compiled on the server side, and so what is being served to the client is just pure CSS. Now, okay, you did see that in the case of Extend, There might be some selectors generated that you don't actually need, but the performance impact is minimal. I would say that don't overthink that. Like don't do premature optimization. Just should you notice that you have performance problems, then do a performance analysis on how fast your CSS is being rendered, and just try to find the bottlenecks and try to rewrite your SAS there so that it produces cleaner CSS that is faster to parse. But other than that, I don't know. I wouldn't really worry about it. I think the much more important part about SAS is that you'll get more readable, maintainable code, and the performance cost is basically negligible.
Yeah. So it just comes down to writing efficient CSS.
Yeah, there's not much to do with SAS itself,
no,
really.
You can shoot yourself in the foot with SAS if you just start nesting heavily, just throwing selector after selector inside each other. You'll end up with huge selectors, which are then, of course, a bit slower to parse for the browser. But again, it's really not the real bottleneck, the selectors. It's the actual properties that you use for the rendering, like transparencies and box shadows and stuff like that, which will actually slow down the rendering. Not the actual, the parsing is not the issue. Selector matching might be, but that's also very, very like a small percentage that you can win with just selectors, optimizing your selectors.
Yeah.
And as Marlon said, don't worry about it until you actually hit that obstacle.
Yeah. All right, so that's next question. Carlos from Spain is asking, how do I import the Valo theme from GitHub into the Eclipse IDE?
Well, Matti from our marketing team has already kind of done that for us. He made a kind of a fork of the current development version of Valo on GitHub, and he made it available through Maven. So you can use Maven for testing out Valo easily, even for your Vaadin 7.1 apps. So you just add a Maven dependency, modify the theme a bit, compile it, and then use it in your app. And also that's available in the blog post on vaadin.com that describes the Valo theme. So there are links to the fork of Valo, which is called Dawn.
Yeah. So lots of useful stuff in the blog. Go to vaadin.com and read the blog. All right.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see. Then we have Asila, who's asking us a very long question.
Yeah, it was on the forum. I read that before coming here, and
why don't you read it out loud?
Yeah. So I'll just read it out loud. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I would appreciate if you could show us how to create a new theme and use reindeer button as a starting point and modify it not slightly but completely. So instead of square edges. Square edges instead of round edges, totally different colors and fonts, background, etc. And most importantly, how the style applies when the button is pressed down, focus is gained and disabled, so the different states of the button.
Yeah.
So, well, that's kind of a bit off topic of SAS here, but relates to theming, but it's a bit too long to go through here. So I will address the question on the forum. I would say. So I'll give you pointers how to actually make a new style button. So if I understood.
Well, if I can go a little bit into
sure.
that. So would you use Extend here?
So let me just think through what's actually.
So he wants to create a new theme, and he wants to make the reindeer button look differently. Now I'm assuming, but we don't know that, of course. I'm assuming that he wants his whole theme to look like reindeer, but I guess it would be possible to just take the button mixin from the reindeer theme. Does it have currently a separate mixin for that?
Yeah, it does. So you could copy paste the main reindeer mixin into your own theme and just remove the line where it imports, where it includes the button styles, and you would then have the base style button in your app and start from that. So it would be easier to override those styles, so you don't have to fight with the reindeer selectors, which are kind of, I would say, notoriously stubborn. Or it has so many states. Like a button seems like a simple thing, but it has those different states. Yeah. So it's a bit harder to actually override.
Yeah, so and that's, you know, as I pointed out, that's one of the reasons why Jouni has been working on the Valo theme, is to make it, you know, really easy to extend and just borrow parts of it.
Yeah.
And you know, that wasn't something that was a priority when, for example, Reindeer was created.
No.
All right, so I don't know. Do we have no more further questions at the moment? So I think we can just wrap this up.
Yeah.
All right. So my name is Marlon. That was Jouni.
Thanks for joining, and
Yeah.
see you on the
See you on the forums.
yeah.
Ciao.